Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Monday, July the 20th, 2020. On this episode, the media. What media do you listen to? Specifically, what news media do you listen to? If you're here in the United States, which television news do you find yourself listening to or watching at any given time of a day? I want to talk about the news media. And in this age of coronavirus, whether or not you think or whether or not you believe, the news media, particularly here in the United States, is doing a good enough job or a decent job at covering issues and stories. That's next. Welcome back. Over the weekend, I was having a conversation with someone about the media and how the media is doing its job here in the United States. And when I say the media, I'm talking about the corporate news media, specifically cable news on television. Now, there, of course, are media that are really extensive and into different areas, whether it's online, whether it is on the radio, whether it is specifically online based only, whatever. There's so many different news media outlets these days. You have so many. You've got the ones on the left, the ones on the right, you've got ones in the middle, you've got all kinds of different politically leaning news media outlets. And of course, pretty much all of these, even the ones that are supposedly in the middle, have an ideology or point of view. And a lot of it is driven by money. I mean, that's obvious, particularly when you're talking about cable news on television. The ownership of these organizations, these news organizations, are in the hands of billionaires. And of course, I've talked before on this particular podcast about the deregulation of media in the United States. This happened in 1996 under Bill Clinton, who was then president. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, which ended up really deregulating the news media field, the field of control of media specifically. And at one point, prior to 1996, you had at least over 300 different organizations, different kinds of people owning news media in the United States. And then soon after this Telecommunications Act of 1996 happened, within a few years of it, we had only 4 or 5 companies, corporations owning 98% of the news media, 98% of the media in general, which meant, and I have alluded to this in the past, there is a vast corporate control of what, in the United States, of what you're listening to, what you're being told, what is being analyzed and discussed, and all of this influences your thoughts, influences how you receive the information, how you interpret the information. If you've only got 4 or 5 news media corporate conglomerates controlling more than 97, 98 or so percent of the news media stations or the media stations, That is a lot of power for 4 or 5 corporations to have. And they have a very powerful role in shaping the narrative, in not shaping it, in truncating it, in influencing it, in steering it. There's a lot of control there. So what media do you listen to or watch? There's so many, as I said. So many of them. As I've also indicated in the past, Fox News is the most widely watched news network in the United States. Its ratings are consistently high, and I've talked about this in recent episodes. And as I've said before, part of the reason why I think that is because there is this, what I call titillation TV, base TV, propagandistic TV. At some point, it's not really even journalism, because it really isn't. It is opinion editorial and an opinion, in many instances in other channels, it's opinion journalism. On Fox, it's not even opinion journalism, it's propaganda and lies. Because there's so many studies that have been done on Fox, about Fox, showing you that even if you did not listen to a single lick of news media coverage anywhere, you would still be more informed, and much more informed, than you would be if you actually sat down and watched Fox News. Staggering but true, but not surprising really when you consider it, because of the lies on Fox News. Everybody knows it's a propaganda channel, including the people who are on it all the time, who are part of it. Let's take CNN, for example. CNN repeatedly has the same story on from morning to noon to night, and the same 7 or 8 people on to talk about those same 2 stories that they do for the entire day. The 24-hour cable news media television cycle is relentless, and it literally, if you look at the structure of it, it is literally about a story and a half a day, if you're lucky. It may actually only be 1 story each day, but for the most part, the main orchestration of any given day on CNN, and it's not just CNN, but certainly CNN is one of the big culprits in this, is to concentrate on 1 or 2 stories as the anchor stories of any given news cycle. And those 2 stories will be the main thrust of the entire day's news programming on CNN. Now, they may choose to have supplemental stories that buttress that fortify that main 2 story, those main 2 stories. But those main 2 stories are always the ones that will be top of the hour, bottom of the hour, top of the hour, bottom of the hour. Unless there's some breaking news. But breaking news is indistinguishable from anything anymore. When you see that term breaking news, it means nothing today. If you're watching CNN or if you're watching MSNBC, which I'll get to in a moment, breaking news doesn't mean a thing now. It's just an alert to get your attention now. It's this potential ratings grabber that, and forgive me using that choice of words, but it's a ratings grabber. It really is. It's this, let me get your attention. And then when you see what follows after this grand announcement or this threatening alert music that you hear for breaking news, It's all a bunch of nothing, or it's what you've heard for the last 10 hours if you're watching it. It's what you've heard for the last day or the last 2 hours. It's nothing new. It's been breaking news for 7 hours already. And then it's presented show after show after show on CNN to start the show as if it's something brand new. This is recycled from 10 hours ago, and it's still breaking news at 10 o'clock at night, after 6 other shows have already broadcast it as that. There's a numbingness now, a numbness, quite frankly, to the way that the corporate news media, particularly in the United States, does its business when it comes to news. MSNBC, the same thing. Breaking news, same thing. Breaking news. And there's nothing really breaking. Very few things are breaking news now. There was a time when you'd hear those 2 words, and you'd see that graphic come up on cable news television, and you would really hold your breath to find out what it is they were going to say to you next. And generally speaking, that is not the case anymore. Now, there are exceptions. There will be times when that will be the case, where there actually will be some literally earth-shattering or significant news of note. That will happen. It will happen maybe once a day, once a week. But generally speaking, it's numbness. It doesn't do anything for you now. We have been numbed into this routine of what news is, how it's delivered, how it is broken, how it is broadcast to us. And what I wonder is, what is the content really telling us? Because I think the content has very little substance to it. And that, I think, is not only troubling, but disturbing, because we are here in the middle of 2020, in the middle of a pandemic that has been going on for more than 7 months, if you include what's going on globally. I mean, let's be honest here. The coronavirus has been in America for almost a whole year. Many of us just did not know it. Newsweek has talked about coronavirus being here as early as September of 2019. Maybe even August of 2019. So we've been living with this coronavirus for almost a year now, and we really have only just found out about it, really, in February of this year? And the way that is being handled in the way the news media covers the coronavirus here in the United States has been abysmal, largely. And the way that Donald Trump is being covered in terms of what his behavior is, what he says, and how the Republican Party is behaving is also similarly abysmal. And those are the 2 stories, or at least 2 of the stories, that I think have extraordinarily important implications for this general election. If you listen to the news media now, whether it's CNN or MSNBC, the 2 stories that are coming up most often are obviously coronavirus, the pandemic, which is ongoing, and the 2020 election. Now, the 2020 election coverage has not gathered steam yet. It will start to in the next month or so, because the conventions are going to be held in August the 17th, I believe, for the Democrats in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and for the Republicans, it's the 24th of August, which will be in Jacksonville, Florida for that one. Now, those conventions are going to be very limited, very different skeletal ones. Very few people will be attending in person. We already know that. But you see, there is no real substantive coverage of some of the decisions being made about coronavirus. I mean, it's all done in scandalized tabloid news style. And as for the election, the right questions are not being asked. And you cannot get the right answers if the wrong questions are being asked of you. If you are trying to get information, you cannot get that information if the wrong questions are being asked. And if the wrong questions are being asked, then you cannot get the right answers. And that's the biggest issue, I think, with a lot of these stories in the corporate news media, or as some people call it, the mainstream news media, is that the questions are deliberately not asked and the questioning is framed from a particular perspective that is designed not to get you the answer that you should be trying to arrive at, or even put you in the position of that. So if you have a news media that is framing the questions and the discussion in a scandalous either or way, this binary choice, or this gotcha choice, and it's all about, well, what is your reaction to this? What is your reaction to that? Rather than some more types of active journalism, something that really challenges the guest or the viewer or both, then you are going to be in a particular pickle. When you don't get to the substance of a story or the framework of a question about a story, what a person in power, for example, in politics, should or should not be doing, or what the history of something is, and you don't provide that as some kind of context, or you don't provide any kind of context, then of course you're not going to give the viewer any kind of education about the subject matter at hand. What you're going to have is a very cursory exploration of an issue, a very important issue. And the real issue and problem is that issues aren't really discussed on news television anymore, TV news. The issues, and when you've got cable news networks that are dedicated to 24-hour news, you better at some point have a discussion that has some substance and teeth to it, some context. But unfortunately, we don't here in the United States. We don't have very much long-form journalism anymore in the U.S. in terms of investigative journalism, especially in the cable news media, corporate news media. There are a few investigative reporters who do some great work. But generally speaking, that era is over. Budgets have been cut. News has become a business. And there isn't any guiding principle about getting viewers information that they can really use. It is all now, and has been for many years at this point, 20, 30 years now, about filling the viewer's palate, watering the viewer's taste buds, driving the neurons of a person. And that's all about the titillation, all about the gotcha question. It's not about informing anybody. It's not about informing the public. It's about innovating them with spectacle, tabloidization. The tabloidization of the news media has really hurt this country. And it really has hurt people in general in the process. And the more toxic ones, like Fox News, completely brainwash people. And we've seen this. There is a great film that has been out for a few years now called The Brainwashing of My Dad. It's by Jen Senko. And Jen Senko does this documentary where she talks about how her dad went from this fairly open-minded person, open-minded and liberal, if you will, to this raging, angry, spitballing, right-wing radical because he watched Fox News daily, all day, every day. And his whole thinking changed and he became an angry, bitter person. Hateful. And that's what Fox News is doing to the mind, corrupting people's minds. It's very dangerous. And then they will... How would you know that someone's watching Fox News? Just ask them a question. And the answer to that question, if you just say to them, well, do you believe in wearing a mask, for example? You can probably tell if they're telling you, no, I don't believe in that. I bet you they're probably watching Fox News or have been listening to right-wing hate radio, like Rush Limbaugh and all the rest of them. Ask them if they are watching Fox News. If they tell you they don't believe in wearing a mask, ask them if they watch Fox News. And I'll bet you 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, the answer you get from them will be yes. Next, a look at the media I think you will want to be watching, especially over these next few months as we get to November 3rd.
Outlined in court filings, inspection reports, and witness statements, the allegations range from unsanitary conditions to unair-conditioned rooms in hot Texas summers and dosing children with mood-changing drugs allegedly disguised as vitamins. At the nonprofit Shiloh Treatment Center in Manville, Texas, legal filings quote immigrant children being held down for injections given multiple psychotropic medications against their will, some not even approved for use in children. In one case, a boy was simultaneously placed on 6 psychotropic drugs, and an independent psychologist found the boy had been misdiagnosed with psychotic disorder, though he didn't have any symptoms. Another child, 13, from El Salvador, said in a witness statement, "I did not want the injection. 2 staff grabbed me, and the doctor gave me the injection despite my objection and left me there on the bed." In other cases, it's alleged children were forced to take pills that staffers called vitamins, given to them without their or their parents' consent. An 11-year-old girl said she was forced to take 10 pills a day, saying, "I would rather go back to Honduras and live on the streets than be at Shiloh." Shiloh would not comment. In 2014, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee called for the state to order the closure of the Shiloh Treatment Center, but it's still open, and migrant children are still being sent there.
Now that is part of a report by Drew Griffin of CNN, he being an investigative reporter, and I think he's one of the better reporters on CNN, a really good investigative reporter, been doing this for a number of years. That was a report from June of 2018, June 22nd, just over 2 years ago now, on migrant abuse. This was the story that people have now forgotten about. People from Honduras, other brown people who have been seeking political asylum here and being thrown into concentration camps and being beaten up by these ICE soldiers, or thugs, if you will, at detention centers, camps. I mean, this is what the United States is doing. This is what Donald Trump is doing. And you just heard a portion of that report. We used to have lots more of those kinds of reports in this country, but of course the news model has changed. And the days of the long form journalistic piece that does investigative journalism, those days are pretty much gone. If you see any of that now on CNN, and Drew Griffin is still around, Drew Griffin still does some good stories like the one that I played a portion of. But if you see any of that on CNN these days, it's 1 hour long programs that are mostly titillating and tabloidy and scandalous. Such as, for example, one that's coming up tonight, and I know I'm plugging it, and it's not my intention, but it's happening when I say this. Donald Trump's conspiracy theories, tonight on CNN. Now, why in God's name is CNN devoting an hour or whatever however long the program is to Donald Trump's conspiracy theories? Why rebroadcast the conspiracy theories of someone who is unfit to hold the office that he holds? That is a very dangerous thing. And doing that in an election year on top of this, that's something CNN would never have done, even if there was someone in the White House who had conspiracy theories, and I'm sure there were. Look, when Nancy Reagan used astrology to guide Ronald Reagan's decisions at the White House, there was no 1 hour long documentary about this. Now, in hindsight, they may have done one, or they may have done one years later, but they didn't do this while Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan as the First Lady were in the White House in the 1980s. CNN would never have done that, and CNN began in 1980. They never would have done anything like that back then. Now the media and the news is all about currency and ratings and advertising. It's not about information. It's not about informing you, which is a sad but true thing. It's not about information. It's not about informing you about things. It's really not. It's about something much, much more different. Money. Making money. News making was never a profitable business, and it has become somewhat profitable, but not that much still. People are still trying. It was never really a profit-making business, and now it is because of all kinds of matters, deregulation, advertising, all these things. And all of this emphasis on who's coming up next in the program. I mean, you've got a guest on one of these networks, and 5 minutes or 3 minutes before, while they've got a guest on, they're already promoting on the screen who's coming up next. I mean, it's all about keeping your eyeballs on that television network and staying there and watching the ads and staying with the broadcast. And they never do the explosive interview first. Or they might do portions of it. They will do the big interview midway through or to the end or halfway through the program because they don't want you to switch over. They don't want to lose you as a viewer. So they will tease you with coming up next, and it doesn't come until half an hour in or 45 minutes in so that you can watch the whole program. That's the news now. It's been the news for a while. But here is what I recommend that you watch or listen to news-wise. And some of these networks most of them are inside the United States, and some of them are overseas. And if you're fortunate enough to have internet access, I do urge you to take full advantage of listening to some of the individuals or organizations that I'm about to mention. And also, if you have a subscription to SiriusXM, I would advise you to take full advantage of it. And if you don't have one, you really should get one. They run roughly, I think, $15.99, $19.99 a month. If you can spare that money, and I know for a lot of people it is difficult to do that because of what we are going through and some of the obvious financial challenges that come with that. But if you can spare, I think it's about $19.99 a month to subscribe to SiriusXM, I urge you to. And it's a very good resource of all kinds of news. Now you'll get news from the progressive side, news from, I guess, the moderates and the independents, and you'll get news on the right wing. You will get the so-called Patriot Channel. You will get the Progressive Channel. You will get the Urban View, which talks about news from the African American, from the black perspective. SiriusXM is a very important source, particularly though Karen Hunter on the Urban View. I think she's very good. Discusses news items, discusses stories affecting the black community, discusses stories that affect people on a daily basis. Karen Hunter and her show is on SiriusXM channel 126 on the Urban View. You can find her, search her online and in Sirius. You can download the SiriusXM app. Very good show. I think, though, two other shows that are very good as well. Laura Coates, the attorney and former federal prosecutor. I believe she may have been a judge, actually, as well. I think she was definitely a former federal prosecutor here in the United States. Laura Coates. Coates is her last name. And Laura, common spelling of her first name. And you may have seen her on CNN. You may see her on CNN from time to time. Laura Coates brings great legal analysis and is someone who raises the right question, which is one of the biggest reasons I like her. She raises the right questions. She raises critical questions. We watch a news media that does not teach you to critically think. We watch a news media that does not teach you to think critically. We are a nation, we are a country here in the United States that is not really taught critical thinking. You will get it in some areas of academia, and you will get it if you've been to law school, because you are inherently taught to think critically. But generally speaking, it's just not there. You don't get that in this country at all. Education system is not geared that way either, and quite deliberately. But Laura Coates, who can also be, and all these people that I'm mentioning can be found on Twitter as well. You can search for them. I think Laura Coates' Twitter is the Laura Coates. And she always raises questions that you will not hear on, even on the network she appears on CNN. You won't hear those kinds of questions being asked and making you kind of think about what should be asked as the frame and how it should be responded to. Joe Madison is another, and this is the person who I think is the most critical, most key person, among others, but Joe Madison on SiriusXM, just like Laura Coates on SiriusXM and Karen Hunter, all part of the Urban View, channel 126. Joe Madison is terrific. The Black Eagle is his name, and that's his moniker. He has been an activist for many years. He's been in an activist community for many years, has been connected to human rights for so long, and has this great radio show called The Black Eagle. Joe Madison, The Black Eagle, 4 hours a day. on Sirius XM channel 126. It typically starts at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 a.m. Pacific. 4 hours. Critical thinking, phone calls, dissection of the news, a lot of news that you do not hear or that does not get covered on the major networks, the networks that we all know on television, gets covered in Joe Madison, including a lot of smaller local stories that are, some of which are quite outrageous stories, by the way. Not for titillation's sake, but to really give you an idea of just what is going on in the heart of this country we live in. Joe Madison is one of the best critical thinkers that this country has. His dissection of the news, his presenting of the issues, his challenging of phone callers who call in to his show is legendary. And yeah, there's a little bit of entertainment to that, but it is necessary, though. It works to make you think. And he urges his callers not just to call in, but to do something. And his favorite line is, well, there's two of them, but one of them is, what are you going to do about it? And every phoner who calls in is asked, well, what are you going to do about it? If there's a particular issue being discussed, Joe Madison challenges his callers, which is something that is not done generally in talk radio. Talk radio often is caller driven. Well, it is caller driven and advertiser driven. And when the callers come in, it's for most people who have talk radio shows, it's how many callers can we jam into this particular hour? And the consequence of that is that there's not any real analysis. There's no pushback if a caller calls in and lies and drops a turd, if you will, and propagandizes. And that's a real problem. If you do not challenge your callers, you are in danger of having a show that lacks credibility. And that is true of those in the right-wing media and those conservative talk show hosts, those right-wing hate radio show hosts who have all these racist callers, bigoted callers call in, and they never challenge them. But if there's a caller who calls into their network or to their program, their radio show, and says something that is directly challenges what the host is saying, then what will happen is they will be responded to in a fusillade of insults. But if there's a racist calling in, they won't say anything, which means that they endorse and agree with what the racist caller is saying. Joe Madison takes on all comers, and he challenges even those who agree with him, and he pushes them to expand their thinking and flesh out what it is they're saying. It is like a law school class. When I listen to Joe Madison, I am reminded of my days in law school, and that's actually not a put down at all of Joe Madison. It's a compliment to him. He is like a law school professor. And there's a Socratic method that goes on. And he pushes and pushes and pushes. And it's all done in a good, important way. So Joe Madison, the Black Eagle, I strongly recommend get yourself a Sirius XM subscription. Sirius is spelled S-I-R-I-U-S. Sirius XM. X as in X-ray, M as in money. I think it's $19 a month or so, and you can download the app on your phone. So you don't have to get any kind of special radio. There was a time, of course, when Sirius and XM radio were separate things, and you'd have to get these separate radios put into your car. And then maybe I'm sure there's still things like that going on, but in this day and age now, in the 21st century, you can get an app installed on your phone. You can download that, and away you go. There's a load of channels. Look, 100 channels, 200, 300, 600 channels now. I forget. And there's, that Sirius XM has got so much stuff on it beyond just the talk shows and the news. But I'm telling you, you will learn a lot from listening to Joe Madison on Urban View, channel 126 on Sirius XM, the Black Eagle, 5 days a week. And you can listen to shows that he's done over the last few days. So if you've missed a show, you can get them on demand. You can listen to a week's worth of shows. There are shows that are archived where you can actually search and find past shows that he's done from a few months back, a year ago. He has special shows that he does. Joe Madison, very important, especially now as we are heading through the coronavirus pandemic, or we're heading through this Black Lives Matter movement that continues on, and the protests continue on, be they in Portland, be they anywhere. And we know what's going on in Portland is insidious, and it's a violation of states' rights, quite frankly. And it is. I mean, I know that there are legal analysts that say, it's the federal government has the authority, but there's no articulable reason for them to come in, which is why it's a violation of the 10th Amendment, quite frankly. Reserved rights for the states, otherwise known as states' rights. And of course, those two words take on a very different meaning for some of us. So Joe Madison, Sirius XM, Urban View, Joe Madison, the Black Eagle, channel 126. I urge you to listen to him. Then there is Amy Goodman, the analyst, activist, journalist, reporter, anchor of Democracy Now! She has been an activist for years and years, and a dedicated reporter. She's gone all over the world, written books, lectured. She's one of the very best that we have in this country, and I don't think she gets as much credit as I think she should get. She hosts Democracy Now! Daily, 5 days a week. You can find Democracy Now! On television, but you can also find it at democracynow.org. Great website, has all the episodes. You can search for any episode that she's done. It's an hour of news. She covers the world. She does more in 1 hour of news on her show than CNN does in an entire day. Amy Goodman has guests from around the world. She has great co-hosts. Juan Gonzalez, a great investigative reporter out of New York and New Jersey. Nermeen Sheikh, who's part of the team, and a number of other people. And she gets to talk to anybody, everybody, large, small, in between, activist, politician. She covers the bases all around the world. Journalists. You get news from a global perspective with Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! So I urge you, make that a very important part of your news day on a daily basis. There is Randi Rhodes, who can be found on Free Speech TV, among other places. You can go to her website at randyrhodes.com. That's R-A-N, as in Nancy, D-I-R-H-O-D-E-S.com. randyrhodes.com. She's on Twitter at Randi Rhodes as well. Democracy Now!, by the way, is also on Twitter at Democracy Now! But Randi Rhodes does 2 hours of great radio, and she can be watched on Free Speech TV, on her website, on her Twitter handle, and she covers news forensically. She gets to all the stories that CNN and MSNBC and obviously Fox will not cover or don't cover, although she will use clips from those networks to make larger points about the state of the stories being spoken about, and she will give her analysis of them. And she's very forensic about how she's doing that. It's very good radio and television, because she's both on radio and TV. She does a very, very good analysis of what's going on in the United States and what government's doing or not doing, what the Senate and the House are doing or not doing. So she gets underneath the news and brings an overall picture to the news and a theme Every day she has a theme, and every day she fits that theme in 2 hours, and provides, if you're watching it on Free Speech TV, or on her website or on her Twitter page, she provides video, really good video of, in this, since we are in the campaign season, great video from numerous organizations who have put together ads against Donald Trump. Of course, the Lincoln Project are just one of the ones that she often uses. She will often use sourcing from the Washington Post. Whatever your feelings are about the Post, one thing that they do very well is they have these great video montages. They do excellent video montages of what's happening in Congress, what's happening at the White House, what's happening in any given story. They put together very good montages of video. They do that very well indeed. And she will often play things from the Washington Post. They have a whole video archive section, by the way, at the Washington Post, and you can absolutely look at the videos they do. They do some great video reporting. So does the organization Now This. Now This can be found on television. If you have Comcast cable, I believe, Xfinity cable, and maybe others too, but Now This is also found on Twitter as well, and maybe in other social media. And they do these 6-minute, 5-minute, 3-minute long form stories told in snippets and sound bites, but also there's a narrative to them that are put to them. So that's also effective. But Randi Rhodes has a trademark personality and has a way with words for sure. She is a highly recommended listen or watch every day. I think it's from 12 to 2 Pacific or 3 to 5 Eastern time, daily, 5 days a week. There are no archive episodes for her, though. You have to register with her and subscribe, and there's a small amount of money on a monthly basis if you want to get to watch some of the other episodes that you may have missed. Randi Rhodes, though, very important as well. And also there are others. Roland Martin, I think indispensable is Roland Martin, covering news on his program Roland Martin Unfiltered, which can be found on YouTube. You can search Roland Martin Unfiltered, and you can find him on Twitter at Roland S. Martin. He covers news from a black perspective, and it's black, and black. So if you want to see the news that you're not seeing on CNN, or if you just simply want to see the news from a black perspective, watch Roland Martin. He is excellent. He has, if you want to see black guests, other than when people are talking about race, on CNN and MSNBC, pretty much, with a few minor exceptions, right? Pretty much the only time you see a black person on as a guest is when there's an issue about race being discussed. That has been a criticism of mine for such a long time. Anytime you see a black person on, the only other time you see them on is when they're talking about sports or criminal justice. So essentially what's happening is the news media, as was pointed out, by the way, in Kamau Bell's The United Shades of America series, which he began his 6th season of last night on CNN, is, you have 86%, according to a 2019 study, 86% of the newsrooms are white and controlled by white people. And in that frame, black people, black men in particular, were conveyed as and portrayed as either athletes or criminals 72% of the time. 72% of the time. So there you go. That tells you everything. When they had conversations about race on CNN or MSNBC, they don't bring on white people in general. The conversation is not between 4 white people. It's always 3 or 4 black people talking. But the issue of racism in the United States really has to be solved and addressed and confronted by white people. And yet CNN and MSNBC, they never put any white people on, or very rarely. It will be one white person and 3 black people, or there'll be no white people there. And this is an issue that white people in America must confront and address and deal with and search their souls to do the work on daily. This is work that goes on for the rest of one's life. And does CNN ever encourage or provoke or push that kind of a conversation on its air? Of course not. MSNBC? Of course not. Oh yeah, they'll have on the black journalist who writes brilliant, excellent op-eds in the New York Times. And I'm not to slight the courageous and the great Caroline Randall Williams. But she is presented as this, not oddity, but this, oh my, wow, this is so profound. And obviously what she wrote, my body is a Confederate monument. Remember that? I read that out here on one of these episodes a few weeks ago. Obviously, it was excellent writing, and it was brilliantly articulated, all of that. And I hate that word. It was excellent writing. Let me just leave it at that. Because when you say, it's just, when you say, you're very articulate, that is racist. It's a put down of a black person or any person of color. That's rarely said about white people at all. How articulate you are. But when a great writer like Caroline Randall Williams is presented on these white-controlled networks, they are presented as this, woo, wow, teach us about the black condition. Like it's some kind of part-time pocketbook thing. This is something that you should be bringing white people on to talk about. Bring on white anti-racist educators. Bring on white people in general. And bring on white panelists. And have them talk about these things. Have them struggle with these issues. Because black people's function is not to be educating white people. We've been dying doing that for centuries. A white person has to take it upon themselves to activate their minds, activate their hearts and their consciences, and do the soul searching and do the work. This is not something that you get taught in a manual. There is no Cliff Notes version for you to digest. No cup of coffee that we want with you. Like Lisa Alexander here in San Francisco. Oh, James Juanillo, James, can you come and sit down with me for a cup of coffee? Oh, teach me about what I have to do. We're not having that kind of thing. This ain't about us telling you. This is about you doing the work, about you wanting to, and doing it daily. This is not some Racism 101 course where you just sit down and consider yourself educated after reading 2 books, one of which will probably be White Fragility. This is not that kind of summer reading exercise. This is life reading. And you have to do the work. Just like we all have to do work on things. On this, white people have to do the work. And it hurts white people when these conversations never involve them, or at least CNN, who of course has someone white controlling it and directing it and producing it and owning it, not putting on white people to have that conversation so that it sparks white people watching to engage in their conversations. I'm not saying that there aren't some white people who do this. Of course there are some. But I always have said it's only 25% in my view. Now, I don't have a scientific number, but I think that's what's going on. There's still 75%, I think, of the white population in the United States that has never thought, even cared, to do the work on any of this, much less to acknowledge that there is an issue or a condition that they should be doing work on. All of that was to say that Roland Martin is indispensable. And if you want to see black people on a news program talking about things other than race, or you want to see black scientists, if you want to see black doctors, if you want to see black economists, if you want to see black news media analysts, if you want to see black internet and technology people, and much, much more, go and watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, will you please? That is a show of shows. Please watch it. Roland Martin Unfiltered daily. I think it's about 6 o'clock Eastern time, 2 hours. 3 o'clock Pacific, I guess. I don't know. You can find those episodes on YouTube, and you can watch them live on all of his platforms, Instagram, all the platforms you can think of. He is an excellent media mass marketing genius, Roland Martin. He's excellent at it. He does it better than anybody I have ever known or learned of, know of or learned of. Roland Martin markets. He's a brilliant marketer as well. And his analysis and his guests are excellent every day. If you want to see black guests, people who are not on CNN or MSNBC very often or rarely at all, if you want to see what black guests and who they are and what they do and what their titles are and what line of work they do, go and watch Roland Martin Unfiltered. It's such a good show and important because you see the same 6 black people on CNN or MSNBC. You can come to what ass hour. Snap your fingers, open your eyes, and it will be one of the same 6 or 7 black people, to the extent that they're on CNN or MSNBC. You will know who it will be. And it will be literally one of 7 people. And they're rotated around. The conversation is being had amongst a very small circle of people. It is I'll leave that alone. Roland Martin Unfiltered. Then there's Thom Hartmann. Thom Hartmann on Free Speech TV, which is, again, Free Speech TV is a very good organization in general. It has a lot of very good stuff on it. Free Speech, FREE, speech.org. You can watch 24 hours a day, live programming period. It's excellent. And Thom Hartmann does a 3-hour radio show or TV show, and just the way that, not quite like Randy Rhoads does hers with lots of video, but he does have lots of guests on. That's one thing that he has a lot of, that Randy Rhoads will not have guests on typically. She will take phone calls, but very few, because you just get some pretty crazy people calling into her show. But Thom Hartmann will take a lot more phone calls. And he will have guests on, he'll have politicians on, he'll have loads of people on, and he will have a progressive perspective, and you will see some really good things on his show. You will hear him talking about some great things, and he will also open up your mind too for critical thinking. He's a great historian as well, and you will definitely learn from Mr. Hartmann, as you will from all of the people I've talked about. But this is really good media. You get a broad sweep. Pacifica Radio, KPFA. And you can search them online. They are, again, a progressive out of California, Berkeley, California. Very, very good. You get information and news that you will not hear anywhere else. You really will not hear the kind of news on KPFA, Pacifica Radio, that you won't hear that anywhere. I'm telling you. On only a few, and the discussions are very good too. So I urge you to look into Pacifica Radio, to Thom Hartmann as well on freespeech.org, and numerous other people on freespeech.org, including Randy Rhoads. But Thom Hartmann, terrific stuff. And finally, C-SPAN. C-SPAN covers the Senate and House, covers a lot of discussions with political figures, with personalities, with authors, book conventions, and of course that's not going to happen anytime in the next few months or the next year or two. But you get the idea. C-SPAN does cover a lot of the conventional journalists. They'll give their analysis, but they will do unfiltered coverage. They take phone calls too on C-SPAN, and you can find them on your cable network. You can find them online at cspan.org, and they have a Twitter handle as well. Thom Hartmann has a Twitter handle as well. Roland Martin, I've told you about his Twitter handle. Randy Rhodes, or all of them. Thom Hartmann's, I think, is THOM. Yes, THOM for Tom, _ Hartmann, HARTM as in Mike, ANN as in Nancy. C-SPAN covers a lot of issues here in the U.S. in terms of politics and the way the media is analyzing these issues, and Beltway media, interviews, all of that. And they will have some wackadoodle callers on C-SPAN. You have live access to the Senate, to the House of Representatives. You have live access to congressional hearings, to Senate hearings. I think it's really good stuff. Very important. Some people say, oh, it's boring. It's not. It's very important. And then finally, Sky News, would you believe? A corporate-owned network. C-SPAN is publicly owned, a public channel. But Sky News is available on YouTube. Sky News is based in the UK. It used to be owned by Rupert Murdoch. It no longer is. It's owned by Comcast now. So it is corporate, but I do think that Sky News, and you can find them on YouTube or online, any elsewhere online, news.sky.com. They offer a good perspective globally, and they do some excellent long-form reporting. They do half-hour news stories, depending on what time zone you're in when you're up, if you're able to be up to watch them. But they will have these half-hour documentaries on that are news stories, but are long-form. They are long-form news stories. They are like when you read something that it's like 25-page news story or in-depth investigative story. Sky News does that, and I forget the reporter, and it's just kicking. I'm kicking myself trying to remember her name. But she and others do these half-hour, just these rangy, in-depth profiles and documentaries, news documentaries, if you will, about some issue that's going on, whether it's on the African continent, whether it's somewhere else. It's just excellent. Sky News does also some of the other stuff that some of these other networks do that I don't like, and I'm talking about CNN and MSNBC, and they will talk about things that I think aren't as important, and they'll have these debates, and they'll do the pundit thing, the split screen thing. They'll do that, but generally speaking, I think Sky News is pretty decent. Now, I know that people in the UK, some of them will not agree with that. But I don't think Sky News is bad. And there's Channel 4 News as well while we're at it. The only thing with Channel 4 News is that it is not open to US viewers. Unless they actually do that in some kind of debate, political debate, Channel 4 News is not something that's 24 hours a day for international viewers, unlike Sky News. And I think that one of the future things that's probably going to happen is that I think Channel 4 News and others will end up doing this. It may be a pay situation, but I think, and I know the UK TV license is one of the big reasons why you won't get this, or particularly in the BBC's case, you won't. But I do think that you will eventually have a lot more networks opening up their platforms so that people around the world can view them. We'll see. But there you have it. That is the look at the media, and the media that you really should be watching. If you've had enough of the same 2 news stories every day, the same 2 or 3 stories that get rinsed through a news cycle for 24 hours, rinse, wash, repeat. If you've had enough of that, if you've had enough of the lack of critical questions being asked on CNN or MSNBC, and the lies of Fox, if you've had enough of the propaganda, well, the people and networks that I have just told you about are your destination. So please support them, and please support the black press. It's very important, especially now, because they are talking about things that CNN and MSNBC are not going to touch. So please make note of the people I recommended. They are all very good at what they do. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.